All right. Good morning, everybody. We are kicking it off. As soon as Red gets done taking photos. Red, we are not starting with a selfie. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Hicks. This is the Digital Marketing 101 session. I will introduce my highly esteemed panel here momentarily. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Ryan Hicks. As I just mentioned, I'm the managing partner at a company called Franchise Supplier Network. I'm also a partner in a company called Rallyo. It's a social media reputation management platform. We work with north of 100 franchise brands, I think 120 now, and growing. Really quickly, as Jam actually so eloquently pointed out just a second ago, would love to have a quick gauge of the audience. How many of the folks in here, can you hear me fine? I see. Okay. So should I restart all of that? Okay. Just really quick gauge. Raise your hand if you are a franchisor. Okay, perfect. And suppliers? Beautiful. Jam, did you want to go any deeper? You good with that? All right. So I want to just set the frame for how we want this panel to flow, this session to flow. We are going to have 3 topics. The first topic is going to be planning and strategy. We are focused on, actually I'll outline the topics. The second is really going to be execution. And then the third section is going to be measurement and really kind of the learning. If you follow the lean startup model, it's the build, measure, learn, but this is franchising. So we're going to do planning, execution, and measurement. Topics that we're going to cover are all things digital. It could be paid, organic, as well as the technology, the services, the staff, anything related to executing on a solid digital strategy. Obviously, digital is more important now than ever, and that's the kind of the focus of this session. I'm missing one thing. I'm trying to scroll. I should have had my notes up. We are going to focus scope-wise on national and local consumer side. We're going to very lightly talk about franchise development marketing. We decided as a panel this is a meaty topic, so we're going to focus this on the consumer marketing side of the house. We may lightly get into franchise development, and there are 2 unique things that we're going to do in this session. We want to draft, especially emerging franchisors, we want to draft questions from the audience. So I asked Tony, I didn't even go check, I asked the app to be updated. If you want to text in questions, you can text directly to me, and we're going to pepper in questions from the audience throughout. My number, and I'll give it a couple of times, 214-883-1881. It should be in the description section of the app as well under the session, but that's 214-883-1881. And you can text in questions. And then also, we wanted to do something different because this is an important topic. And there's also other suppliers out there that have really great things to add. There's other franchisors that have great things to add. So what we're going to do and what we're all committing to do, right, panel? We're going to do a live follow-up where we're going to do a podcast. We're going to do a recording where we're going to highlight what we talk about in this session. And we're going to draft any of the unanswered questions that may have been had. Folks can contribute questions to that. We're probably going to do it the second week of October because we have some travels and things like that. So text in questions, 214-883-1881, and we're going to be doing a live follow-up. Let's jump straight in because we have a lot to cover. So that we don't go down the line and have the long intro thing, I'll just introduce the panel. So we have Abby Fogel. She is the Vice President of Brand Relations, Marketing and Brand Relations at Unleash Brands, which is a phenomenal family of brands. We have Scott Snyder, who's the CEO of Badass Coffee, and that's the most badass name of all the brands here. Scott Snyder right here. We have Jam. Is it Hashmi? Yes. Yes. He is the president and the CEO of ClickTex and also FranchiseSoft as well. And then we have Shanna Cresson, who's the CMO. Did I say that wrong? Okay. You have a mic. Fix me.
Shanna Christen. It's not as exotic as
Christen.
you make it sound.
Yes. Okay. She's the Chief Marketing Officer of Goldfish Swim School. I will note, Shanna has a session later today that's called Brand Fun Magic, and it is going to be a phenomenal session. So if you are here, and if you're planning maybe to be here, you should be at that if you want to get in tactically data behind how the brand fund should be allocated. It's going to be a phenomenal session. So I just wanted to highlight that out. But we're going to go ahead and jump straight in. Be sure to send in questions, 214-883-1881. So hopefully that wasn't too long of an intro, but we're going to jump in. I'm going to pose a question to the group, and we're going to talk about the planning and strategy portion of the big topic of marketing. And so I want to pose the question to the panel. How do you go about setting the goals, the strategic direction for your marketing plan? And what do I need to be thinking about as an emerging franchisor? What do I need to be thinking about as I put my planning hat on and come to the planning table? And I will kick it off with Shanna.
Well, this is a shameless plug for this afternoon's session. This is exactly what we're going to be talking about, and probably the thing that I love most about marketing. What we really have to do from the beginning, and we're all different brands in here, and you're all different sectors of franchising, and you all have different numbers of units, but it's really about, and this sounds simple, but it's a lot more complicated than that, knowing your brand. And when I say that, I mean not knowing what you know about it, but what do the consumers know about it, making sure that they understand who you are versus your competition, who you are in that market, why they should shop your location, why they should continue to give you loyalty, and then knowing your target consumer as well, and I mean deeply, not just the demographics that we all know, but the behavioral, the shopping patterns, where they shop, what they do, who they talk to, where they consume their information. The more you know about your consumer, the better you're going to be. And then, of course, know what makes you better and different than your competition in a very deep way, not just I think we do it better than our competition. Why do you think that? Why do you think customers, what do you need to tell customers so that they understand that as well? And then setting your goals and objectives, of course, and that's short-term and long-term. You need both a short-term plan and a long-term plan. Things change a lot, especially when you're an emerging franchise. You have to be flexible enough to accommodate that change, but also know where you're going and what you're doing. And then structure. My last favorite thing is you have to have an integrated plan. It cannot be siloed by channel. You have to have the campaign, the contest, whatever you're putting out to the public, and make sure it's integrated and it makes sense across all platforms in a way that you can measure it, and then measure it, see how it's working, make some changes, and reallocate again.
Beautiful. I will give the number, by the way. Please, if you have questions, text them in, 214-883-1881. Jam, what say you?
So how many people know Shark Tank, right? Shark Tank? So, if you've ever gone out there in Shark Tank, and in fact, there are some franchisors that have, one of the things that they always stress is know your numbers, know your metrics. And so, an important thing, I think, when you're looking at planning, strategic planning from a marketing perspective, is to begin with the end in mind. So you've got to understand what are your goals in terms of where I want to get to. Is it 50 customers need to walk into my store? If I've got to get 50 orders to make $10,000 a month in revenue for my franchisees, begin with that end in mind. Step one. And step two, look at your metrics. And I think that's so important. If you look at historically your metrics, in fact, we did this extensively when I worked at WSI with Dan Monahan for like 12 years, and he was all about the numbers. We used to look at the numbers historically to understand where we were, what things worked, what things didn't work, before we went out there and put a plan on what we're going to do for the next 12 months, 15 months, 18 months. And so I challenge each franchisor in here to go out there and understand what your true metrics are. Ask yourself this question. You don't have to answer it now, but ask yourself, do I really know the metrics in my business that I'm using to manage and drive my vehicle? So that's
very well said. Scott, what say you?
The hard part about being third is the good ones are already taken. It could be worse. Could be worse.
I'll start with you every single time from now on.
No, actually, I'm going to kind of pile on both the first two answers. I think, when we started planning for this was one of the topics that I think is most important. I think we have a tendency as emerging brands to focus on a lot of different things at once, and it's really important to have kind of a holistic approach. What are we trying to accomplish? Most emerging brands have limited budgets when they're starting, right? And so having alignment on your team about what are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to build brand awareness? Are we trying to sell franchises? Are we trying to drive sales into our franchise stores? Well, the answer is probably all the above. So how do you do that in an organic way? And it really does require alignment on the team. And then to Shanna's point, it requires alignment around what that brand voice is. Because I think the other mistake that we make often with new or emerging brands is we have a different voice for how we're talking over here, how we're promoting and marketing and for franchise sales versus what we're trying to get our customers, the customers of our franchisees, what we're trying to get them to respond to. So that consistency in brand voice is critical, because building that brand awareness drives customer confidence, drives consumer advocacy, right? And that consumer advocacy builds demand for the product. That demand for the product is what's going to ultimately sell your franchises, because people want to react to that and fulfill that need. So alignment around planning and alignment around voice are critical.
Yeah. So, Abby, I'll rephrase the question because we had a couple of folks walk in as we have been going. How do you go about setting goals and strategic direction as you're looking at the marketing plan?
Yeah, and I think that does align with some of the things that the folks already said here on the panel. So when you are planning, really knowing what you are hoping to accomplish, what you are trying to do, who you're trying to reach, I would say for a lot of the emerging brands, you're probably very focused on brand awareness and just getting your brand out there and building that reputation for yourself. And so your franchise concept should not be the best kept secret. You want people to know who you are, especially in the emerging state. And so when you're planning, it's also easy to want to put out a beautiful marketing calendar at the beginning of the year. And you might have some pressure to do that as well, but leaving room to adapt with the changing climate, of the landscape of marketing, being willing to adjust your themes, adjust your strategy, adjust your tactics as well is really important. So leaving some room there as well to adjust and adapt as the year goes on, and maybe only planning 6 months out or by quarter, so you can change, and leaving room for those things as well. And so when you are setting your goals, I would say, yes, start with what are you trying to do? Is it brand awareness? Are you trying to drive traffic or drive traffic to a retail location? So beginning with those goals, and I would also say align your team on those top 3 goals for the year and really rally around those things, and making sure that everyone's aligned. I think getting your team aligned is kind of the first step if you're a leader of your team, asking for their input as well. And so if you have their input and alignment on those goals, it's going to make it a little bit easier to hit those goals throughout the year.
Beautifully said. So I have received several text messages with questions. They fit in perfectly in some of the other sections, so I will be working those in. I'm going to pose a question to Shanna, and anyone else on the panel, if you want to add to the answer, please feel free to do so. Shanna, how do you balance brand building versus lead generation? Because obviously, from a franchisee perspective, franchisees want leads. They want the brand fund to go farther than ever possible. But how do you balance building brand versus lead generation, and how do you think about that?
So I think one of the great things about coming to these conferences are you get to have people up here that have not only done it before, but have also made the mistakes. So learn from my mistakes. I will tell you one that I made early on is I called it the marketing fund. It is not a marketing fund. It is a brand fund. So now I've just added an extra word. I call it the brand marketing fund so that I don't have to, explain why I changed the name. But think about branding first. Branding does generate leads. One mistake I made was not explaining that from the onset. Of course, franchisees want leads. That's why they think you are there to drive leads. And that absolutely is one of the things that we do from a franchise perspective. But remember, they bought into this franchise because they bought into a system, not just an operational system, but a marketing system as well. And what you want to do from a franchise perspective is protect and drive awareness of your brand. That is your number one goal. And what you need to do then is explain to franchisees why driving that brand at a national level and then helping them by giving them the tools and the materials they need to drive that brand at a local level will ultimately lead to them driving leads and generating more revenue. So I don't think you separate the two, but I do think you absolutely have to concentrate most of your efforts from a franchisor perspective on branding and then giving them the tools and the training to help generate those leads.
Jam, Scott, or Abby? Go ahead, Jim.
Only thing I would say is 100% on, between branding and lead generation. But I'll hammer back to metrics, right? You need to be able to prove some level in our ROI, whether you're brand building or whether you're doing lead generation, because that's what the franchisees want to see. What they don't want to see is kind of their money going into a black box without any idea of what they're getting, because each individual franchisee wants to know, well, what did I get out of that? So if you can go out there and take a look at your metrics and, again, have those KPIs, whether it's measuring on the brand side or on the lead gen side, and how your marketing strategies are impacting the franchisee's business, you're going to have a much easier sell.
Abby?
Yeah, I would piggyback on that and just say the education around both brand building and lead generation are so important. Your franchisees most likely are not marketers by trade. As Shannon mentioned, they came in because you have the operations, the systems, and the programs already laid out for them. And so making sure that you educate them on what brand building is, what you are doing to build the brand. There's so much that your marketing teams do behind the scenes that they don't see, and that they might take for granted because they don't see all of that. And so just really that education piece around what your marketing team is doing to build a brand, what they're doing from lead generation, the programs that you might have in place for both of those, and really explaining the differences and how they work hand in hand and how they are important is very important.
Yep, very well said. And to Jam's point, we got another question about KPIs. The last section that we're going to be talking about is really measurement, so we're going to cover that there. Any other... I like the way that you framed that, Shanna. You said, here are some of the mistakes that I made, and you shared that. But I want to ask the panel, are there any other planning mistakes that you would pose to the group, or any other tactical takeaways before we put a thumbnail on the planning section, and we're going to dive into the execution topic? You want to kick it off, Scott?
I've made a lot of I think the biggest one, though, is trying to do too much. Do what you can do well and build off of that. We're going to get into measurement here, but do what you can do and what you can do well and build on that, right? The biggest mistake we see is, I've got this much money, how can I spread that around? I got to get over here, I got to get over here. And you don't do enough in any one of those channels, and you're not consistent across those channels. So do what you can do and do well, and then build on that.
And I'm with you. I've made a million mistakes. I would say that there are times that I've let my own personal biases towards something get in the way of the planning. Look at the research, look at the metrics, make sure that you are thinking through the lens of your consumer and not your CEO or not yourself. So making sure that you are putting together a plan that makes sense for your consumer. And then I agree, don't try to be all things to all people. I say that in our training to our franchisees all the time. You can't be. You will run out of money, you'll run out of time, you'll burn out your people. And then speaking of people, both vendor partners and your own team, hire slow, fire fast. I've made that mistake. Get in there and make sure that your vendor partners that you do have understand franchising. It is so different than marketing. I've been in marketing for 30 years. I've done the corporate marketing. Franchising is a whole different beast, and the amount of customization that you need, because the markets are slightly different, not as different as franchisees think they are, but slightly different, is really important to understand. So making sure that you have partners that you set very high expectations with, and you have a very clear scope with them, and then hold them accountable. Am I right, Jordan? Holding them accountable and making sure that they live up to those expectations, both for your team. You will find your franchise partners will step up to the challenge if you've set the right groundwork, and so will your team. So put the right people in place, get rid of them if they're not the right people, and then set high expectations, and they will step up to the challenge.
We had a really good question that was texted in, because I think it's a good transition to the next topic while also putting a kind of a footnote on this one. What should be included in your marketing plan when entering a new market? That's very beefy, but what should be included in your marketing plan when entering a new market? And I'll mention that we tried to skip big, long introductions. We have folks in different sectors, and so that obviously can inform your marketing plan. But who wants to take a stab at that? What should be included in your marketing plan when entering a new market?
Yeah, happy to take that one on. So when you're entering a new market, some key things that you want to outline is your tactics and your channels. So are you going to be doing Instagram? Are you doing Facebook? A lot of companies now are doing TikTok. And so having, a clear definition, and again, you can't be all things to all people. So do one or two of them very well and don't do, all of them in a very poor manner. And so when you're entering a new market, having clear outline of content, tactics, channels, who are you trying to reach? If it's a new location, of course, you're trying to, drive leads to that location. And so having digital ads, if that's your strategy, and having that clearly outlined, the content strategy, again, what has worked for the other locations. That is the benefit of being in a franchise system, is the testing involved, seeing the metrics of other locations. Again, it is different per market slightly, but across the board what has worked for other markets, and then adjusting your strategy for that new market and laying out the content, the tactics, the resources they need, the assets, and making that readily available for that new franchisee to come in and execute easily.
Yeah, and speaking to your point on focusing in on deciding the focus and the channels, one of my favorite phrases, when I used to have an office, I had the phrase fewer, bigger, better, right? And so that's very important because you cannot extend your resources to all the places that you want to extend them. And so that is informed by the measurement and the data, which we're going to end on. And then that builds a really nice loop. Anyone else have anything to add to that topic?
I can't shut up, and I'm really sorry about that. When you're an emerging brand, you do not have big budgets. We had 12 locations. We have 135 now. Where we started was much different than what we look like right now. Think of those tactics. If you understand enough about your market and your demographic, you're going to be able to think about those low-cost options, right? So email is a low-cost option. Social media, influencers, referrals, word of mouth. Those are all things that don't cost a whole lot of money. And if you don't have a big budget, it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of planning. You need strategies around each of those social channels. They're not all the same. They shouldn't be used all the same. But concentrate your area. You'll need people. You'll need help. You'll need somebody really smart in those areas. But if you don't have a big budget, that's a great place to start, is on the local level. B2B is really an important play there. So start where you can and build from there.
I'll add on to that quickly as well. And so if you are an emerging brand, one of the first things you need to do is create a marketing playbook. And I know Goldfish has some beautiful ones as well. I've written a few for the companies that I've been before. So if you don't have one, please write down marketing playbook. You need to create one of those for your franchisees. You need to create easy to execute processes for them. As we mentioned as well, if they're going to events, what are the talking points? What should their event look like? We assume that because we're in marketing, they're gonna come put a beautiful tablecloth and have the beautiful materials that they've printed that are up to brand standards, because that's what we do and how we think, but they don't know that unless you show them. So having visuals of what things should look like, what the talking points are, how they should represent the brand. And so marketing playbook is great to include there, as far as including social media, what to post on social media, which they not post on social media, what should their event look like, what channels they should be using, and the appropriate things to post there. And so I think brands that have done marketing playbooks really well have found some great success in having their franchisees execute on their marketing strategy.
Yeah, that's the tough part about only having an hour, because we could probably talk for 30 minutes on the marketing playbook. So we're going to transition to the next topic, which is really execution. So we're going to get into a little bit more of the meat and potatoes, and I'll ask the panel if you need to quickly describe a little bit about your business to build context, you can do so. But what are your most effective digital channels? And we're going to get into the macro in a second and talk about all the things that you should be thinking about collectively. But what are your most effective digital channels? We'll start with Shanna.
Okay. It's not a digital channel, but I will say your website should be the absolute hub for everything you do, and you point it all back, and that's how you can measure it. So you have great analytics there. From a digital perspective, ours is really social. We work with moms, we work with young families. Social is where they are, so we make sure we have really strong strategies around there. From a digital paid perspective, social display works incredibly well for us, not just for branding, but it also drives a heck of a lot of leads. From there, pay-per-click. We have a really good pay-per-click campaign. Retargeting, so when somebody does go to our website and they go to one of our swim lesson levels and they leave for some reason, we will retarget them. And we just started a new retargeting campaign recently that's showing great dividends and reminding those people why they went to our website in the first place and what they were looking for, and just top of mind awareness. And then after that, layering in the national, when you do have enough funds to be able to help that with that brand awareness, we're seeing great things on connected television. We are doing TikTok for hiring from a national perspective. So many channels out there to utilize, but those are the ones that are most effective for us.
Jam, I'm going to cut you off. We're going to go to Scott so that he doesn't have to go third.
Hey, wow, look at that. Actually, I'm going to kind of chime in again on Shanna. It does start with your website, right? That is a hub and spoke approach. We adopt an omni-channel approach where we are a 33-year-old brand that hasn't done anything for 28 years. So we are re-emerging. We're a 33-year-old startup. So for us, it is an omni-channel approach. We are trying to build awareness of the brand, build advocacy for the brand. At the same time, you're trying to sell stores. And so you've got to, it really is a rising tide lifts all boats approach. So for us, building brand advocacy is largely based around social. And so Facebook and Instagram. For our development side, it's really more so built around paid search, which ultimately drives them through the website through organic leads. I have to give a shameless and complimentary plug to Fishman PR. PR is a huge part of this too, because it integrates with the strategy, it integrates with a digital strategy, but it gives legitimacy and validates the concept. And so PR is a huge portion of our digital budget. And then finally, at the local level, extensive use of geo-targeting and geo-based apps to drive people into the front door of the store.
Okay, we can go to Abby, then Jam. Jam, sorry, you're last.
I will piggyback on what Shanna said as well, because we serve a very similar customer, serving moms who are looking to enroll their child in a program. And so Google works very well for us. And one thing I just wanted to mention that's not directly related to the channel itself, although it is that be in tune with what your customers are searching for. And so in your brand marketing materials, we might say that we are, the premier enrichment option for whatever it might be, but mom's not using the keywords premier youth enrichment, whatever. Like, she's literally just Googling summer camp or crap for my kid to do after school. How can I keep my child busy and alive and growing? And so making sure that that what they are searching for, we are very in tune with what we want to say in our marketing materials. We want to say child and children and make ourselves professional and, sound that we are that premier option. But mom's saying kids. She's just saying kids stuff, kids karate classes, kids karate programs. And so just making sure that what your customer is searching for, if you're going to put a lot into Google to make sure that you show up, is super important. And so, we're mostly using social, retargeting on Google. Email works very well for us. So making it very easy for your customer to find you and then enroll in whatever you're offering or buy whatever you're offering.
Jam.
So we've got a lot of emerging brands that we work with, about 100 brands that we've got websites and digital marketing stuff that we do for. And we've always recommended, when the budgets are tight, I like 2 channels. I mean, you can spread out across a lot of stuff that you can kind of do for free and just posting. But if you're going to go out there and do any type of paid media, I like Google because it's intent-based search. So for one of our clients, the mom woke up in the morning and typed in how to go out there and like coding classes for kids. So they're typing in very specific keywords. That's an intent-based search. They're looking for something specific. Whereas on Facebook, it's more of a, it's a, they're an ideal match because maybe their kids are in soccer and they're spending their money putting their children in soccer, so they may make a good candidate for summer camps for coding. And so we always say that if you're going to do direct lead generation, we like Google paid search. The organic SEO portion takes a bit of time. It's a little bit longer, but of course, by far your highest ROI is going to come from that Google organic listing on that Google Maps listing, especially for local businesses. But what I really like is paid advertising on Google. Yeah, it's a little bit more per click, but it's very intent-based. And then simple retargeting ads on Facebook/Instagram, because Instagram's owned by Facebook. So what that does is you're only retargeting to those people that have already arrived at your website from email, from word of mouth, from networking events, from your Google paid ads, and so on. The remarketing is, pennies on the dollar, and it allows you to go out there and get that second, that third, the fourth brand visibility in front of your audience. So I'd say Google paid ads with Facebook remarketing twist.
I will say kudos to the audience because we have a ton of questions here and I don't know how we're going to cover everything, which is why we're doing the follow-up thing. I think it's a good plan. So one question quickly. Are you setting up initial social channels for your franchisees? If so, are you running into issues with Instagram shutting down new units accounts, ways to get around it? Anyone want to share?
We set them up I have a great marketing support team, so we do set them up initially with Facebook and Instagram. Those are the two channels. No, we haven't run into that problem. I guess I'll have to check back in with my team on that. Yes, we set them up, but we oversee it. So we have great partners that help us oversee some feedback loops, but also we make sure that everything is on brand. So my team also checks in on everything. Of course, you can get into Instagram and see some of that. They have to do their own reviews on Facebook. But yeah, it's very important to make sure that you're setting it up for them, and then you're overseeing what they're putting there as well.
Yeah, it is an absolute best practice because the whole point of franchising is you have a brand that the franchisee's bringing into a local market. And so if you have a termination and a franchisee no longer owns that market, you own that brand asset. They can't go change the page to, instead of Badass Coffee, I can think of another name, but we'll keep it on the rails, right? But you want to own that channel. Abby, did you have anything else
That's
to add?
exactly what I was going to say is make sure that you are an admin level of those pages. You have a franchisee go rogue who's upset or has a termination, of course, please make sure you're an admin of those pages and that franchisee has the correct permission so they cannot remove you as an admin. Set up those pages, set that brand up for success in the new market from your brand standards, make sure it's cohesive with the other locations. Also from a naming standpoint, don't let them name it whatever they want. Make it consistent for your brand and their location. This is not, Abby's Premier Martial Arts. This is Premier Martial Arts South Lake or whatever the city might be, whatever you have for your brand. But yeah, set it up and make sure you're an admin because something may happen that you think that the franchisees are happy and nothing's ever going to go wrong, but it may.
We actually had what we inherited when we acquired the brand was everyone had their own pages. And so one of the things we had to do, we actually had to take it back. But one of the things that we invested in was content management tool that gave the freedom for the individual stores to continue to post what was going on locally, right? We talked about Don's presentation yesterday. It all starts about community and what's your role in the community. We wanted to embrace that, but we wanted to give them a platform to do that in a way where all the content that's on there is basically already approved. And so there's training involved, there's an investment involved in the content management tool, but that made that a manageable process where everybody got to win.
I would just say that with Instagram, it's a big issue in terms of two-factor authentication, and in fact, Facebook as well. They're getting to a point where we had one customer that had to Facebook asked for them to upload the financials of their company in order to verify so that they could go. So it's becoming a much bigger issue with a lot of fake accounts and all of this stuff that's going on, with Facebook and Instagram. They're really tightening up on it. One of the ways that we kind of get around it, and disclaimer, I don't own any interest in this company, but there's a social media tool that I came across called Hero Post, and it was like lifetime subscription for like a couple $100, but basically allows you to create a hierarchy and have your accounts connected in there. So the first time you set it up with Instagram and you connect it in there, now you don't need to go in there and log into Instagram and have your franchisee log into Instagram and trigger that two-factor authentication. So you're protected from that based on the fact that you're now using this third-party app that's been authenticated So it is a big problem. There's some ways around it. Be careful not to use different computers and so on to try to log into the same Instagram account. You're gonna run into some trouble there.
Question from the audience. We have a lot of them. What percentage, and this is the topic is Digital 101, but the question is what percentage of digital versus print? And I wanted Shanna to share, because you kind of you have a situation where you've done something unique to merge digital and print a little bit, but does anyone want to speak to what percentage of digital versus print?
From a franchisee perspective or from a franchisor perspective?
Well, I don't know because someone submitted the question. Does
I'll give you both.
whoever submitted it, do you want to share?
Well, from a franchisor perspective, most certainly I would say at this stage, 12 years in, we're probably about 60% of our marketing fund is used on digital in some area. A smaller percentage most certainly is used on print, but the print now, so if you're thinking connected mail or something, it all integrates at this point, and we all have to integrate all of these channels. So there's a digital component to direct mail now. So it's not a one or the other, it's how to join them together. And then I would say from a franchisee perspective, they definitely do more print, so flyers, community events, B2B. We have a couple of programs out in the community. So they probably do maybe 40% print products and then 60% digital.
All right. Jan, did you have anything else? Okay, perfect.
Just make sure you're tagging things and tracking them, right? Using a QR code, using a UTM parameter. Go out there and track everything, whether it's print or whether it's on a Facebook ad or even a post that you randomly did for Veterans Day. Because you want to be able to go out there and see your client acquisition cost per channel. Like you need to be able to go out there and have that data. Only way to get that data and segment them properly into their respective channels is to track it.
Yeah, which made me think of another question that we had texted in. What advice would you give around, this is from Andrew, what advice would you give around managing brand building and lead generation from an attribution standpoint? What tools do you use? How do you give credit to specific channels along the customer journey?
This is the rudest thing to say, I don't care. It's who gets attribution at the end of the day is the last step, right? So we do have a wonderful digital program and we have it connected, integrated into our POS system. So we know exactly who came in through our digital channels. That's wonderful. And I think Jam and I might throw down over the importance of metrics because I believe in the holistic. It doesn't matter as much. I think we get a little too in the weeds on some of the metrics sometimes. It's an integrated plan. Yes, know your metrics. Yes, have KPIs for everything. But don't go so deep in them that you're losing sight of the big picture. It has to come together. So I would say that it matters not necessarily channel per channel. Look at it holistically.
I got a text that's kind of funny. It's not a question. It says, peso, paid, earned, shared, owned. Start with your own media. It's a fixed expense. I like that question. That was funny. Let's ask the bigger question. How do you use your marketing fund? Who is in charge? Meaty topic. Shanna has a whole session kind of presentation thing on this momentarily, but we'll start with either Scott or Abby. You guys can take a pick.
Again, this is a little situation specific. We acquired the assets of a brand that hadn't had any spend in years and years and years and years and years. So for us, it was a conscious decision to overspend. But I think what I wanted to share was the way that we communicate with our franchisees, because we're beyond the building trust phase. We're always earning that, but early on there was very little trust, and so a lot of it was around reporting. So our approach to the ad fund, number one, back to the planning, right? There was alignment on the leadership team about what we were trying to accomplish, but our brand marketing fund, I'm going to use that, is managed by our senior vice president of marketing. But our reporting is around, we divide it up into working and non-working dollars. I think it's a much easier story to tell, and it's much more enriching and trust building when you're sharing the working dollars or things that are actually being spent in the market on their behalf, not necessarily the people that are being used to build it, design it, services, subscriptions, content, things like that. So that's how we break it out, as working and non-working dollars. We are in an overspend situation, and that's been planned, but that's how we break it up for our franchisees.
Yeah, ours is pretty simple. We majority used it to do media buys for our franchisees. So we bulk buy media and then disperse it throughout the franchisees and franchise system. So pretty cut and dry. I think you could spend so much time talking about this, and would encourage you to go to the session later today all about the brand fund. One thing I would say is don't get to the end of the year and just have your funds sitting around. Make a plan for what you're going to do at the beginning of the year. Communicate that. Be transparent with your franchisees, and make sure you're spending that money appropriately, because oftentimes if you don't make a plan for it, you will get to the end of the year and it's like, oh, we haven't done anything with that yet. We should probably do something, and people are going to start asking about it soon. So do make a plan for it. Like I said, we're using ours to the majority is going for media buying for our franchisees, but ensuring that you have a plan and that you don't get to the end of the year and you haven't spent it is really important.
Jam?
I think it's been covered.
Beautiful.
Ditto.
All right, end of panel. See you guys next year. Just kidding. Tactical question. I just lost it. Where did the tactical question go? I remember it. It said, how do you go about finding your keywords? Because I think you mentioned earlier, like, it's very important. People aren't searching for the premier destination for XYZ. They're searching for crap for children or whatever you said. But how do you go about finding your keywords?
Seems like a great question for Jam.
Jam.
Thanks, guys. There's a lot of tools out there. If you're running Google Ads keyword tool is great. SEMrush, SpyFu. There's a number of keyword research tools. But one thing I really like, if you've started noticing in Google when you're typing in a search, there are actual full phrases or questions that people are typing in that it says what other people search for. I can't remember what the exact terminology is. But what I typically do is I'll put in my keyword, like, whatever, coding classes for kids, and then I'll go down onto that search results page and I will find the questions, and there's usually 4 or 5 listed, and then it's actually dynamically changing. So depending on the question you click on, the rest of that list changes. So I'd write down all those questions. And remember, sometimes people will type in coding classes kids, but sometimes they'll type in a full phrase. Those phrases are sometimes a little more cost effective to go and bid for. And so I would say do that level of extensive research so you can get a longer list, and then throw dollars at it, and then of course measure everything.
Yeah, I think the big mistake here, again, to Abby's point earlier, we overthink this stuff, right? And this is one of the few areas where instead of covering the universe and then working it down to something very specific, start with the very specific, because you have tools that are going to give you the rest of that, and you can evolve your search from there.
Another question. How do the Zors on the panel partner with marketing agencies? Do they vet out preferred vendors for the Zs to choose from, require one agency, or give the franchisees the option to use any agency?
We allow one vendor partner per area. So I have one digital, I have one PR company, we have one SaaS tool for social media. And the reason we do that is because and I've been in other franchises that haven't, and that's also why I do it this way. You can't support your franchisees if you're allowing them to use 5 different digital companies. You also don't have system-wide data, so you can't give best practices. Those things are so important to a franchise to understand and to support your franchisees. You have to know what's going on. I can't integrate 5 different digital companies into my POS system. So for that reason, for all those reasons, we go with one vendor partner for each area.
Abby, anything?
Yeah, we're very similar as well. I would also think about when you are approving these vendors, you and your team are going to the people to manage them. So if you approve 5 digital marketing vendors, your franchisees are not going to be holding their hands and making sure things are brand compliant. Your team is going to have to meet with all of these vendors, ensure that they are on the same page with your goals, your branding, the terms to use, the graphics to use, and all of those things. So it can be a really heavy lift for your team if you are managing so many different vendors in each space, and to really ensure that they understand your brand.
I will say that we have 9 minutes left. I have 15 or so text messages here, and we haven't even gotten to the rest of our agenda. So we're definitely going to be doing the live thing. Let's transition over. Were there any other executional mistakes to avoid, or top executional takeaways? We can just do a couple of cliff notes, and then we're going to move on to the measurement section. But does anyone want to share any executional mistakes to avoid to wrap up the executional section?
I'll say signing with a partner that doesn't understand the full scope or share your mission and vision of your company. From the beginning, when I had a lot less budget, I jumped on what I needed to jump on because I was just building out the marketing ecosystem for Goldfish. I wish I would have taken my own advice and hired slow and fired fast. It would have saved me a whole lot of pain. Coming into a partnership without a plan for now and the future, making sure that your partners understand who you are now, but they have the capacity to grow with you, and trying to go it alone as opposed to hiring subject matter experts in the different areas. I know a lot of you are very brand new. I've had some great conversations over the last couple of days. You have to invest in your people, and your business is going to grow so much faster if you get somebody else on your team that has the same kind of passion, that you can relinquish some of the control so that you can work on the strategy and you can work on the future vision of the company, and let that person do some of the heavy lifting.
This is probably a segue into the last section, which is the measurement. But I think one of the other big mistakes that we see is once the plan is in execution, especially on the social side, the failure to monitor and to evaluate and to engage with the brand voice in all forms, I think is critical. If things are out there that are just sitting there because you're not on top of it, and again, that could be with a partner or that could be within your own staff, but it's critical. You have to stay on top of it. You have to be engaged, and you have to keep your brand voice at all times. So,
I would just say, a common mistake that's made is blindly trusting, whether it be a vendor partner. I mean, we're an agency, so blindly trusting your agency because they said you need to change your website. You need to ask the follow-up question. Well, why do you suggest that? Because it doesn't look pretty, or my idea of the color blue is different than your idea of the color blue. It's so opinion-based. So, oftentimes I see franchisors just blindly going out there and saying, oh, well, my agency said I need a new website. But you've got to ask the follow-up questions. Why do I need a new website? What metrics do you have that you're looking at to say that I have? And have those conversations, because it's better to go in more educated. You and your agency both will do better and come out better as a result of it.
Yeah, and as Don Fox said yesterday, everyone is a marketing expert. So it's also franchisees and your advisory council and all the rest. Did anyone else have anything to add? Top mistakes? We will ask 2 last questions here. The first one being, what are the KPIs that you measure, and how do you measure them?
So I do measure, no matter what I said. We do measure everything. So for television, we do connected television and we do national. We look at reach and impression, right? So that's a big big reach vehicle, and we need that. We need to be able to hit as many eyeballs as we can. So television works great for that. Engagement for social, and much more important than likes. I know when I first started, franchisees were just trying to find anybody they could to sign up and be a part of they wanted the numbers as opposed to the engagement. So really looking at how our posts are engaged with is much more important than how many people are following. And then for digital, we look at pay-per-click, we look at pay per lead, we look at lifetime value. So having that integration into our POS system allows us to really say, not only is this what's happening from the lead generation standpoint, but this is how many people have converted. And that conversion number is really what I try to get franchisees to pay attention to, so that they're not so worried about all the vanity metrics and blowing up my poor digital partner here. They really have to concentrate on it. I had one person, this is really quick and I'm sorry. I had an older partner in digital before we moved to our new partner. And he got up in front of our whole entire system once and said, does anybody have $1? And somebody gave him $1, very trusting, and he gave that person $7 back. And then he said, do you have another $1? And he said, well, yeah, and he gave him $7 back. The whole point was, how many times would you give me $1 if I'm gonna give you $7 back? That really illustrates the point that it's pay attention to your return on investment there, not necessarily all the vanity metrics.
I like that analogy, Jam.
I would just say that, especially for lead generation at the franchisee level, when somebody says, oh, I've set up goal tracking or conversion tracking inside my analytics. So if people are spending 2 minutes on the site, I'm counting that as a conversion. But that's really, to Shanna's point, a false vanity metric. Because I don't know if you've seen a lot of these videos on social media. Some of you are probably watching them now. But it's where they actually have a whole setup with multiple computers and phone setup, and you basically can buy traffic and buy engagement, and they do it through machine learning, right? So how many of these Instagram followers that are influencers that have got 6 million people, they make a post and they get 35 engagements out of whatever, 2 million people? Because a lot of that stuff is not real. So for us, whenever somebody says, well, what do you measure as conversion? I'm like, phone calls and lead form submissions. That's it. Because that's real leads. And for us, when we have that conversation, then, and if that's not happening, then we look further up the funnel to find where the engagement or the impression or the click-through rate may not be good. But at the end of the day, the metrics that I find from a lead generation perspective at the franchisee level, or even if you're doing franchise development lead generation for franchise candidates, lead forms and phone calls.
Yeah, we have a question from out there in audience land that says, since all data is collected and is evidence of what has happened, how do we analyze what is possible, not just what has happened? Is there a broader data pool that is forward-looking? It's a really big question, but does anyone want to speak to that?
We have a dashboard, so operationally and from the marketing side, we pull in our key components, right? All the most important things, and then we as a leadership team take a look at that and analyze it, and it does show the future growth. So it shows us where our best practices are coming in. It shows us our franchisees that are really taking full advantage of what we have to offer. So it shows budgets, it shows how much money they're spending on digital, and then by taking a look at this in a dashboard, I can marry that to their enrollment, I can marry that to their revenue. Now I know who's doing really, really well, and we can go back and dig in and find out what those best practices are. So I would say a dashboard of just your top KPIs from a marketing perspective will help to guide you to who's doing it really well, and then you can figure out exactly what's happening well and replicate that and share that across the system.
Yeah, and to add on, because we had other questions, but Jam, you mentioned phone calls, lead submission forms. There are folks, franchising touches over 200 different sectors or industries, however you want to slice it. And so for some, phone calls and web submissions may not be your attributions. If you're a restaurant, you're probably not tracking how many web form submissions that you have. But what are those KPIs? And you want to be tracking and measuring those. Scott and Abby, I think all we have time left for is you two, if you want to add to that last question.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is I know we're talking about what to measure, but also thinking about how often you are looking at those metrics is really important, because you can have all the beautiful dashboards you want, but if no one is actually looking at them, they're not going to do any good for you. So setting up some sort of schedule, some sort of reporting schedule, sharing those metrics with your team to ensure that you are looking at them, because especially in marketing, everyone's going in so many different directions, trying to get a lot of initiatives done. If you don't have a regular schedule of, I report after the end of the month, that the first Tuesday of the month with my team, I have expected reports that I get out to show our ROI on our marketing spend. And so just making sure you have some sort of schedule that you're looking at these dashboards and that you are sharing the metrics is really important, because otherwise you can set up all the dashboards you want. If you never look at them, they do you no good. Just
2 quick points. Because we're a restaurant brand, we We measure those conversions in a lot of different ways. Things that we see in the store, obviously, are AUVs going up, but we're also looking for things like conversions into loyalty program, and so we try to track all the way through. I think the biggest thing, though, the biggest mistake that we make with data, again, kind of like the earlier point, what are you doing with the data? Don't ignore the data, right? So test, monitor, evaluate, right? Get creative. How else can we spin this? What's working? What's not working? What's getting in the way? Refine that, retest, and then repeat.
I'll just say a broader pool of data beyond just in your system. It's great when you have a company that has multiple brands and you've got, franchise systems across multiple industries, and you can cross-check industry averages, standards, things like that. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of great vendors in here as well. They've got a pool of data because they are working with not just one brand. They may be working with multiple brands within a category, and they've got data metrics across multiple brands. Tap into those resources. They've got that data, they were reporting on that data, and you may be able to figure out some averages and things like that that you want to benchmark against.
Very well said. Round of applause for our panel. And that concludes our session. Thank you guys very much.